Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host, and it's a pre-recorded show this evening. However, I will be in the chat room to answer questions or say hi and all that, and also wish everyone a happy new year because that is coming up in a few days. So I wish you all a very good 2023, and I want to thank all those who support the show, and I appreciate every single listener. And again, I hope you have a great 2023. The guest tonight, Curt Jaimungal. I'm really excited to have him on. I've watched a number of his videos on the theories of everything. He's got a great YouTube channel and podcast, interviews all kinds of interesting people and a number of people in the UFO world. And that's really why I got a hold of him. I saw that he had some kind of interest in UFOs. At least he's looking into them, curiosity. And he has had a number of really great guests, and I'm going to talk to him a little bit about that and how he got into this and all that. So without further ado, I will bring him in. Welcome to the show, Curt.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Thank you, Martin.
Yeah, you know, I've had a lot of people. I announced last week that you were going to be on this week, and I got some email. People are pretty excited that you're coming on. So there's believe it or not, even if you didn't do UFOs, there is a crossover of people that, you know, watch your channel and I saw you have a lot of subscribers and a lot of very popular videos that you put out there.
Well, I hope I don't disappoint those people who are looking forward to this.
No, you won't. No, you won't.
I hope I don't disappoint you.
No, not at all. So what made you decide to actually create the Theories of Everything, or it's just called Theories of Everything podcast and YouTube channel?
So I've always been interested in the physics term theories of everything. That is, how do you unify quantum field theory and then gravity or general relativity? I've almost always been interested in that since I've been a kid. And then when I went to university, I became more interested in stand-up, and from stand-up, so stand-up comedy, from that I did film. And then from there, when I graduated, I went into filmmaking rather than into math and physics, primarily because when you have to do math and physics, at least for myself, I despise it. So my favorite courses were always the courses that I wasn't assigned. So if someone says, you have to do so-and-so, you have to do this homework assignment, I despise that. I can't, I'm extremely averse to it. It makes me tense. It makes me not want to do it. So, but however, if there's a different course, I'll look up the book for that course, even though I'm supposed to be studying for some other course. Anyway, the point is, I don't like to do what I'm supposed to do. So yeah. I went into filmmaking then, which is a great avenue for people who are just as desultory as myself. Then I started to make a film and release some of the interviews on YouTube. And those are essentially podcasts, interviews. And that started to take traction. And I thought, given that the pandemic is imminent or occurring right now, why not? And I said eminent, I meant imminent. Why not why not interviews, for instance, Donald Hoffman? Because I hear so many people talk about his theories, and I've heard him talk about it at a fairly superficial level. And he's claiming that there's mathematics behind it. Okay, well, I can read that math. Why don't I read his papers and then interview him? I did that, and then that took off. And I thought, hey, given that I'm extremely interested, there's like this burning passion in me for theories of everything. Why not go back into that? It's never left me. Even when I was doing films, there's an element of physics and math in them. So I put out more interviews, quote unquote interviews, not even podcasts, on that subject. And that seemed to take off. And so it's not as if it was a conscious decision at one single point. It was a gradual change. And at some point I called it Theories of Everything, whereas before it had a different name.
Yeah. Well, it's fascinating. And, you know, I've had these curiosities too, but not at your level, you know, not at such a deep scientific or a mathematical level, but I'm still fascinated. I would say I'm a fan of it all. And so I have a curiosity about it. And I think it's great that you also looked into a number of different topics, and we'll talk about them later as well. Because, you know, consciousness is something that you've looked into and have done some interviews on, but it's also something that I get contacted all the time, and people are saying they believe there's a connection between UFOs and consciousness. And I've been trying to understand exactly what that would be or how that works. And even when I've had people try to explain it to me, I still can't understand. And there's a great quote, and I'm trying to remember who said the quote, that what we know is a drop, drop, and what we don't know is an ocean.
Right.
Yeah, and I do believe that. I believe there's so much to learn, and we just know a little tiny fraction of what there is to learn.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So I'm glad you're doing this. And
so, what do you think the connection is between UFOs and consciousness? What do you surmise? What have you come across?
I have tried to understand that, and some people are saying that it's created through our consciousness, but then that doesn't, like on an individual basis. But
interesting.
But I don't, then I counter that with, okay, well, what about the mass sightings? There's so many sightings, like the Phoenix Lights that had thousands of people that saw it, and there's one in Chicago in a area, and there's this whole bunch of sightings where there's been, many multiples of witnesses. So that doesn't really, pan out in that particular situation. So,
yeah.
But I think it's still really interesting. And I've seen several people on your show, like I was just listening to Ross Coldhart, and he's been on my show before. I really respect him, like him. He's a journalist in Australia, of course, and he says some fascinating things. So I'm just wondering, was he one of the more interesting guests that you've talked to about the UFO topic on your show?
Martin, I think I promise I'm not being or trying to be politically correct, but each person that I interview on the UFO topic is interesting in their own way, and I think you found that true and found that as well. Someone said to me that there's only characters in the scene, and I don't know why that is, but it seems that that's the case. Ross seems to be much more of the sober individual, but many of the more public-facing ones have uncommon personalities. So I find them interesting. Yeah. Let me think if there were any that were uninteresting, because I think that's I can give an accurate answer to that. Okay, if I encounter one, I'll let you know.
Okay. I know you had...
I think there's one or two, yeah, that I call uninteresting. But that doesn't mean that they're wrong or that I disbelieve them. It just means that
you had Stephen Greer on, which I'm not really kind to Stephen Greer and on the show, too kind. Sure. But a lot of people, as soon as you had him on and people watched that show, they said, "Oh, you got to watch this." He really challenged him on a lot of things, and so you did a nice job on that particular show, I believe, and challenging him, which I think anyone that is out there claiming, more or less that they know what's going on needs to be challenged, in my opinion, because I personally think that we have no idea. Our governments, I don't believe, really have a full understanding. I saw that Ross kind of touched on that as well. But they may know more than we know about the UFO topic.
Yeah.
So
just so you know, my goal in any of the podcasts is never to challenge a guest. If that happens, that just happens. It's just questions occur to me and I ask them. So I don't go in thinking, how can I disprove or prove a person? I go in thinking, how can I understand what they're saying? And how can I, if I don't understand it, if there are gaps in my knowledge, how can I fill them? So with Stephen Greer, I didn't intend to challenge him. I also don't think I challenged him. So I know some people are saying that. I think what they're referring to is, he said, I could explain the physics of this, but your audience wouldn't understand that. And I said, okay, well, I don't think you know what show you're on. That's why the audience is here, at least the majority of them. So please, if you have that knowledge. And then some people, an extreme minority of people, are getting upset because they're saying you shouldn't have asked him to explain physics. He's not a physicist. I didn't say he was a physicist. I'm sorry. He was the one who said that he could explain. So that's what I was doing. And that came across as a challenge. I didn't intend it. Secondly, there are many of his claims that I asked for quote unquote evidence, which triggered him. But I take that as a fault on mine. I need to improve as an interviewer, because my demeanor came across as disbelieving and perhaps even disparaging. And I apologize to that, Stephen, if you're watching. And I didn't mean it to be that way. So that's just my fault. I need to work on that.
Yeah. Well, no, I think that's exactly what they were talking about. And yeah, it's there's a lot of times I've said that too. I've had people on the show that have made extraordinary claims. And, I had a woman on the show that claims she was riding through the rings of Saturn, and I basically had to end this show early. It was a live show. I just, it was just going out there a little too far I was uncomfortable with it.
And how did you end it? Did you end it by sorry,
not in a rude way. I tried to end it in the softest way I could. And I just said, well, that's going to do it for the show, tonight. And
okay, so she wasn't offended.
I talked to her afterwards and kind of smoothed it over a little bit.
Okay,
yeah.
So there was some umbrage there.
They was wondering why I cut the show short. Yeah, she was on with a guest, with a co-guest. So anyway, but that's there was only a couple of times that I've done that in over 10 years, so 11 years now. And I guess as far as this subject goes, when it comes to UFOs, UAP, whatever you'd like to call them, do you think that there's any one theory over another that these things could be, or do you think they could be a multiple of things that people are seeing?
I think that I don't favor one theory over the others. I find flaws, like 6 blemishes, if I think about a single theory for a minute. I just see that's what I mentioned that's what I meant when I said that I have questions. They occur to me. And I don't get to cite them all or recite them all. Sorry. I don't get to bring them up to the guests. So I just find flaws with virtually every interpretation, which either means that there are flaws, which I think is the case, but it also means that I don't understand them, or also could mean I don't understand them, which I think is the case. So that's why I need to work harder to understanding these theories. And then thirdly, that we don't have complete information, which I think is the one fact that virtually everyone agrees on. We don't have complete information on this.
Yes.
So that's why it's difficult for me to favor a theory over another.
In that way, though, how would you, as a scientist yourself, how would you suggest that people are looking into this topic, are trying to get data for this, for what is occurring? I mean, it's such a Yeah. Given that it's not replicable, right?
It doesn't seem like it is. However, there is CE5 that some people claim is something that can be verified and repeated. I don't know, but that's the claim, and many people who aren't even in the Stephen Greer camp claim that. So, I would say that the best way to gather data in this is twofold. One is to perform CE5 near some of the instruments, some of the instruments of the Galileo project. And then secondly, apparently there are some hot spots.
Yes.
So why not launch a private, now this all requires billions or millions, at least multi-millions. Why not launch a private satellite to monitor some of these hotspots and live stream it if it could be? That's what I meant. That's like the easiest that come to mind. How to study this scientifically. It has to be streamed, because otherwise you get, like, even for instance, the Large Hadron Collider, which by the way costs multi-millions, so it's not as if this is some project that's unheard of. There's precedent for it. Even that, the data is classified. Sorry, that's false. Even that, the data is not released because there's terabytes, or petabytes. There's so much data. They have to compress it. They have to use algorithms. So you don't get to see the data. So somehow we need to be able to see the data for a private satellite that's launched. And everyone needs to be able to have access to that. Now, I don't know how that works in terms of logistics, but conceivably it can be done.
Yeah, there are a few people that are kind of going along that line that are trying to, like I'm trying to think what it's called. It's open. It's open. What do they call, like open software or whatever it is? Sure. Oh, yeah. So there are people that are trying to put things like that together, and where everyone could have, not everyone, but people that are involved in this can have some type of equipment
Mm-hmm.
at their home. And like you say, if something is caught, that is not explainable, that can be seen, then they could live stream it to, basically everyone else that's involved. And I think it's free for anyone. I can't remember the name of it. People may ask me that. So if I figure that out, I could put it in the show notes. But there is that service that is out there. As far as I know, it's already been established where people are setting up all over. And, and there are a lot of people that just say there's nothing to this. For instance, Neil deGrasse Tyson, you hear him often like just say there's nothing, and he goes on and on about there's 8 billion cell phones out there. Yes. Why don't we have a crystal clear picture? And and then just the military is seeing these things, and all like that. And so I guess I want to ask you, I considered that closed-minded and not really scientific to just pass it all off like that. I'm using him as an example, but what do you think about that? Don't you think that science should be open to at least exploring what all these people are seeing, and there is some data for?
I think it's a form of I have to be careful because I would like to get Neil on the podcast.
Yeah.
But okay, let me burn some bridges. I think it's an example of scientific grandstanding. I don't believe he means what he says. I think that he says that, and people I'll speak broadly. I think people like to say that to give off an air that they're rational and thus superior in some manner. And I don't think that he believes what he's saying, because you can ask him a set of questions, which I don't want to ask here because I don't want him to, I want to ask it to him directly. But essentially, Neil, if you believe that, what is it precisely that you're saying no to? Firstly, define it. Secondly, give the probabilities. Thirdly, let's bet on it. And I'm willing to put some money up. And I wonder if he is as well. So that's to me the true test of a belief. Are you willing to put some money against it? And then the odds have to be like bookie odds. Bookie? Yeah, like a bookie. That is to say, imagine he says 99-1. Well, then that means, Neil, that if I put up $100 and you put up 9,900, you believe this to be a fair bet. Okay, so let's do that. And if you want to make it even more interesting, let's do it as a percentage of income. So that's actually more fair. So let's do that. Oh, yeah. You truly believe it's 99%, 99-1 or 99.999-1. Then I'm going to put up $1 and you put up $1 million. And you think that should be fair. So that's what I would say. Yeah. And look, imagine he doesn't. Imagine he then backpedals and says, okay, it's 80% to 20. Okay, well, then it doesn't deserve the same derisive attitude. 80% to 20. There are pills that you're not even allowed to touch as a pregnant woman because it has a 0.002% chance of causing some damage to your fetus. So you're not even allowed to touch that pill, let alone swallow it. So you're saying that you're scorning a whole, not generation, but a whole set of people and being snide and so on for a 80 to 20 chance. There's so much I have to say, but I'd rather save it for a conversation with him.
Yeah. There's a video out there where he says something like, you need to know in science when you don't know. You need to be smart enough to say that you don't know, which I agree with. And then yet he goes on and claims he knows everything about UFOs, that they're not, they're not real. They're not.
Well, he makes an argument, which I think is, again, a fallacious one, or at least it's a misrepresentation. So he'll say, look, unidentified means unidentified. You see something, you don't all of a sudden jump to aliens. I see a blur in the sky, therefore aliens. That's not how it works, though, Neil. It's not just that you see something in the sky and you jump to aliens. It's that you see something in the sky and it's correlated with what many other people see. It's correlated with other sorts of experiences. It's correlated with, say, cattle mutilations. It's correlated with plenty else. And if not all correlated, it's not as if every time you see a UFO, you find a cattle mutilated. But I'm saying there's correlations. So it's not merely you see something and thus you jump, quote unquote, jump to the conclusion that it's therefore aliens. And also, it's unclear if it's just aliens. It's not as if that's the only theory going around in these circles.
Yes, right.
It's not even clear what alien means. Does it mean time traveling people? Well, that's difficult to verify. It's difficult to understand what that means without breaking, well, yes, without breaking certain laws of physics. But even that's dubious because you can have closed time-like curves in general relativity. It's just there's certain problems with time traveling. But then there are other. The point is that it's not simply you see some object in the sky and then you conclude that it's thus some extraterrestrial. But that's what he's saying, that, or I don't want to speak about him because I'd rather speak to him, but that's what some people in the skeptic community claim is going on. And I don't think that's fair.
I don't think it's fair either, because there's a lot of the people I talk to about this subject are not saying that that's what it is. A lot of people say that they have no idea what it is other than, there was something there. They're not saying, extraterrestrial. I think that's a very good possibility, but I don't know if, myself, my own opinion, that is a very good possibility that that's what it is, but it could be so many other things. Like you mentioned, the time travel is one of the theories that are out there. Interdimensional is another one. And then I had an ex-CIA officer last week who thinks that it's something that's always been here, before us, and still remains here and around us.
We're the foreigners, right?
Yeah, we're the foreigners. We're the ones that preceded or whatever. Which it's all fact. To me, it's one of the reasons I keep doing this show. I really enjoy doing the show because I get to hear all these ideas and things. And after all these years of doing this, and over 500, I think you're 537 for the guest. I don't really know anymore.
537 guests?
Yeah, I really don't know anymore at this point. It's just it's still very exciting to me because I like to hear about the actual incidents as well. That really fascinates me a lot, because some of them are so bizarre, they make no sense at all, which to me almost makes them even stronger. Just bizarre things, because it doesn't appear like it's anything that could be made up. Or I like to, when I meet someone that is outside of the UFO world or whatever, and I happen to bring up a topic that, it kind of feeds into this, and I say, well, by the way, I do a show on UFOs. Oh, well, let me tell you about this story. And I've heard some just amazing stories that are so bizarre and almost don't even make any sense. I'll just give a quick example. This is my show. I know I've talked about it before on my show, but I was out in Phoenix at a conference out there, and there was I was walking my dog, and there was a girl out that worked the casino that was outside smoking a cigarette. And she said, "What's going on in there?" And I said, "Well, it's a UFO conference." And she goes, "Oh, wow. Geez, maybe I should check that out." And then she started telling me the story. She said her and a friend were driving past a mesa, and they saw this like triangular thing, like lift off and kind of float toward them. And then it was directly over their car. And then it blasted like this bright light down inside their car. And they sped up to like 100 miles an hour and to try to outrun the thing. And it was just right over the top of the car the whole time. And so they like went off on side roads or something like that. And she said, and it was gone. It just vanished. And then she said, all of a sudden, the biggest owl I've ever seen in my life was right there in front of the car. Now, something so weird that doesn't make any sense. I just think that is just an incredible thing. And other people have talked about owls. And here's this girl I'm talking to that has never looked into the UFO topic, just had that one event. And there's a lot of interesting stories like that. That make no sense. I love the ones that make no sense. It's just very curious.
Was she able to explain how she could see it above her car? Because
she had it came in from the she had a sunroof, and it came in that way. But she saw, like, first of all, she saw it they could see it was over the car itself, and then the light came down and lit it up like a blast of light. The whole car was very, very bright inside, and it was during the day. It wasn't an evening sighting either. So yeah, it's really bizarre.
Yeah.
Again, makes no sense, but those are the ones I like.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as far as we're going to talk about other topics as well besides the UFO topic. But what do you think about the U.S. government's involvement in looking at the data?
Well, it's either an admission or it's obfuscation, and either one's interesting to me.
Yeah. That's something I never really thought of. But some people have said that in the UFO world, that they think that this is just window dressing and just hoping people go away after they get some answers and not really get too many enough out there. And we've been told this a number of times that it's being looked into, and over the decades, Project Blue Book, the Condon Commission, or whatever that was called. So there's been a number of times that there feels like there's going to be some type of promise of understanding this, but I really don't think that they understand. That's my own opinion.
Yeah, I get that feeling as well.
Yeah, I mean, if they had to say to the United States, the people of the United States, like, we really don't know what it is that's flying around in the sky that people are seeing. We have no idea what it is. I think that would raise a lot of fear in a lot of people, and I don't think they'll ever say that.
I don't know. I imagine that the panic, quote unquote panic, would be momentary for that. If they just said there are objects in the sky and we don't know what they are, I don't know if that would cause extreme panic or if it would be panic that would be prolonged. I think that that's an excuse, unless they have something else that it doesn't occur to me. I don't know. I don't buy that as an excuse. I don't think it would happen, and I just don't buy it as an excuse. But again, I don't know. I'm learning, and I don't know. I don't buy it.
Yeah. So have you yourself ever had a UFO sighting, or anyone you know?
Not that I know of. So
yeah.
Maybe, but
yeah. And what about when you have done shows on UFOs? Have you ever been contacted by, someone that said, "Hey, people. Look, I want to talk to you about this sighting I had"?
I get numerous emails.
Yeah.
Still, like, even months after a show. It's been months it's been 1.5 months since the Stephen Greer, and then months before that since the last UFO themed show on the TOE channel.
Yeah.
And I get them maybe every day.
Huh. Isn't that something? I get quite a few as well. And I have a form on my website that people can fill out, anonymously. Actually got hacked. But I do have a way for people to post on my website when they want to talk anonymously about their sighting, just to let them, get it out there. A lot of people just want to be heard. That's why you're getting the emails. They want to share and get it off their chest or whatever. So
right.
I bet you get some interesting ones come through.
It's at the point I can't read them. So unfortunately, I can't read them. So I apologize.
You just have too much going on.
There's way, way too much. I can't read my own emails from the people who are working for me, like editing.
Wow. Yeah.
I use the time at the gym to go through some unread messages, but that's not enough time. And then by the time the next session, there's so much more piled up. So it's unfortunate. Yeah.
I remember I talked to you. Are you familiar with who Seth Shostak is at SETI? He's the senior scientist at the SETI Institute. And he told me he gets 4,000 emails a day. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's a heck of a lot of emails.
Yeah, I doubt it's 4,000, but yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe including newsletters he signed up for. But yes, it could be. It could be.
I mean, I could see hundreds. I mean, I feel like
exactly.
I get many dozens myself.
Well, you can do a calculation, like 4,000 times 365, and how many is that? Is it the same person emailing multiple times? Jack Sarfati, if anyone's on his list, there are at least 20 emails a day from Jack. So does that count as 20 emails or one?
Yeah, exactly. So let's. I think I kind of went through everything that I was thinking about. I guess I do want to ask you: do you ever think that people will eventually understand what it is that UFOs, UAP are?
Yeah. So I'm in a minority camp, but again, this is my present deliberation. It tends to change every couple weeks or every day sometimes. So I think, yes, I think we'll understand it, but we'll understand it the same way that we understand a sperm whale. So we don't know what the heck a sperm whale does with the majority of its time. We don't know how it attacks, how it eats its prey. There's so many mysteries, but yet we imagine that they're a mammal. We think they're a mammal, and we see the evidence for that. And we understand they live in the ocean. We understand their evolutionary, their relationship in the phylogenetic tree, and we understand a bit about what it does eat, even though we don't know how it does eat it. So I imagine it would be like that, like broad strokes we would understand. But as for specifics, much like anything else in science, it's not going to be complete, nor in the case of the sperm whale satisfactory, at least not to people who study sperm whales. Most people don't care.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people are saying that we're in some type of disclosure now since 2017. And I think that's, and a lot of people claim it's already been disclosed, but I don't particularly agree with that.
I don't know what they are referring to. And I've heard so many people say this, but what do you mean? What counts as disclosure to them? Like, do they even say that? What do they mean? We're in the middle of disclosure. If what they mean is that it's a long process and we've started step 0 or 1, okay. But if what they mean is that it's been disclosed, like, what more do you want? What do you mean? What more do you want? Do you have that little disconnect with not ufology, but just because that's a word that's apparently tainted. The people who are interested in UFOs, do you not understand what they want? Like, they don't want just some government saying that there are objects and we don't know where they're from. We want to know, do they know more? Do they have access to craft? Can we see a picture? Can we have some admission, some explicit admission? It's not, I don't know what's meant when they say disclosure has occurred. What are they referring to? And right. Well,
yeah, so, agreed.
So I don't buy that.
I had Lou Elizondo's been on my show a few times, and one of the things he said on another podcast, and I questioned him about it, was that we're soon to see a 23-minute video. I don't know where he came up with that exactly, but it was supposed to be with multiple craft, and it's going to be really good, evidence or whatever. So been waiting for that for almost a year now.
Yeah, and 23 minutes coincidentally is the exact time frame of a television show with commercials. So I don't know what form this video takes. And by the way, I love Lou and I respect Lou. That was in no way a jab to Lou. Like so just so you know, I do not take that as a like. I'm just letting you know. Maybe he's been told something.
Yeah,
I expect that he's been told that.
Right. All right. Well, there's some other topics I would like to talk to you about. So I guess I would like to ask you, what is the most exciting research topic when it comes to theoretical physics these days?
Right. So physics. Okay. So let's get clear as to what theoretical physics means, because so there's high energy physics, which is what I like, which actually doesn't mean physics. It means math that's inspired by physics. So for people who are interested, there's something called a Poisson bracket. You use that in classical mechanics. Now, if you just take the Poisson bracket and you find some new construction with it, or some new result, some new theorem involving the Poisson bracket, you can publish in a journal for classical mechanics, even though it may have nothing to do with classical mechanics. So that's what theoretical physics is like. It's just math inspired by physics, which is why there's such criticism for string theory because it's unclear, does this have any application? It may have in principle no application, or in practice no application, because in order to test it, you may create a black hole, for instance. Okay, so there's that. So, but I happen to like that. I love theory. So that's just like my bread and butter. If I was to redo it, I would go into, like, for something that's actually physics. What I think is actually physics, or what is actually physics, is condensed matter physics. So plenty of, like I mentioned, the theoretical side, they have exotic states of matter that come about. And it turns out that they have a basis in something called condensed matter physics. So superconductors, supercooling materials. And, well, that's enough.
Well, and when it comes to like the standard model of particle physics, can that explain the universe? I know that's kind of a intense question. Maybe I asked it wrong.
Well, okay.
Okay, let me try. I'm not trying to. Let me try to ask that again.
Please.
Yeah. How does the standard model of particle physics explain the universe?
Well, it doesn't. So,
okay.
It doesn't explain the universe. It explains particle interactions. And even there, it doesn't explain, quote unquote. It gives some calculations, some tools. There's a physicist a philosopher of physics who I interviewed named Tim Maudlin. And he said that whenever you learn quantum theory in university, you don't learn quantum theory. You learn quantum mechanics. So a tool for calculating what's going on at a small level, so at a subatomic level. But a theory should have an account of ontology. Like, what the heck is going on? What is physically happening? The standard model is much like the shut up and calculate mindset. And it doesn't explain. A part of an explanation, at least what we think so, as colloquially, is to understand what's going on. Just because you have statistical correlations, it doesn't give an account as to what's metaphysically happening. So I wouldn't say it explains the universe. And secondly, it just explains, if it was to explain anything, it would be particle interactions. And it's not clear how gravity comes about. It's not clear how consciousness comes about. And I would say that those are extreme parts of the universe. Well, not extreme. Those are crucial parts of the universe that we would want to know an account of in order to, quote unquote, explain the universe. Unless what they mean is explain the physical universe. But even there, like I mentioned, it's incomplete. And virtually every physicist agrees on that.
Now, I know, like, the gravity is really, really hard to understand, how it works. And I know there was sort of a minor breakthrough in that, I don't know, maybe 5 or 10 years ago. And how does that fit in with, there's so many questions that I think we have that we can't really understand, in like dark matter and, black energy. Am I saying that wrong?
Dark energy, black
dark
holes,
energy. Yeah. So there's just so many things that we don't understand, and they may have some type of relationship to each other. All three of them.
Yeah, they may. It's always tempting to think that the mysteries have a relationship to one another. I don't know if that's always the case, but it's one route to go.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that's always fascinated me is the quantum, the entanglement theory. So what are the implications of quantum entanglement for our understanding of the universe?
Someone I want to interview, Martin, is someone on this recent experiment at Google about quantum entanglement and wormholes. So I don't know. I haven't looked into it, but apparently there's something called ER. Just a moment. EPR equals. Einstein-Rosen bridges. Right. So ER. Okay, EPR equals ER. That just means that entanglement equals a wormhole. It doesn't exactly mean that. There's some mathematical formulation. I don't understand it. I don't understand the philosophical implications for quantum entanglement. And so something I'm working on to understand it is a book on the interpretations of quantum mechanics. So I'm writing that, and that will then I'll hopefully have a coherent answer for you. So my answer, whenever I don't understand something, I just tend to write about it.
Interesting. Do you think there ever will be a theory of everything? It's kind of evasive like UFOs, right?
I see there being, for what a culture at a certain time thinks of as complete, yes. And then I imagine that there will be some other piece of evidence that comes about that reveals a new vista. So for instance, in the late 1900s, there was a theory of everything, and it was Newtonian mechanics, so classical mechanics plus statistical mechanics. And they thought that's all, or electrodynamics too. And they thought that's all. It was unclear how to combine them, and it turns out that you get special relativity and many other effects when you combine them. But to them, the toe was on the horizon, and I imagine that that's what we'll be in a state of in the next 30 years. The toe will be on the horizon, if not complete, but then something new will be discovered that shatters all of that.
Yeah,
so,
I
sorry,
agree with that
continue.
part of it. Sure.
Yeah.
And so I guess the whole thing about entanglement is just so fascinating. It doesn't seem like it could even be possible. The interactions across unlimited space, supposedly. I mean, I don't even know how they test something like that. Do you have any idea how they can test something like that?
Yes. So there are ways of creating a scenario that, because of a conservation law, meaning, so here's a conservation law. There's mass conservation. If this was to disappear, then the mass in the room changed, and you have to look somewhere else for the mass. And it turns out that if you look hard enough, you'll find the mass pop up somewhere. So there's mass conservation. It turns out that there's not exactly mass conservation, but the point is, I'm trying to explain what a conservation law is, that something is conserved across time. It turns out spin is something that's conserved across time. So elementary particles spin, and they can spin in two directions, what's called up and what's called down. So if the total spin in this room is 0, and we created particles, and I know for sure one of the particles has a spin up, then I know that the other particle has a spin down, because it has to, those have to cancel in order to equal 0. So what happens is you create particles that you don't observe, and through some arguments, they're not supposed to have a defined up or down, which is strange to think about. And there are some theories that go against this. For instance, Tim Maudlin is a realist and believes the particles do actually carry an up or down. But in the standard interpretations, they don't have up or down until they're observed. They exist in an amalgam they exist in an amalgam of up and down, a superposition. It's what's called superposition. I don't believe in superposition. I know that's so strange. I'm making such inflammatory statements, but I can explain why I don't believe in superposition later. Anyway, so it's up and down. Let me be clear, just in case someone's going to comment and I never get to the explanation. I believe in superposition as a mathematical tool. I don't believe that particles are indeed in two places at once, for instance. Okay, so if you create a particle or particle pair, and you know that this particle is in some superposition of up and down, and this one is in a superposition of up and down, you created it, but you don't know what, because you're not going to observe it. And then you wait until one goes off to Canada. Where are you, in the States?
Yes.
States? Yeah. Okay. So one goes off to Canada. The other goes to which city are you in?
Well, I'm in Rockland, Maine.
Okay. So one goes off to Maine, and you can figure out, and you can measure them. So every time I measure mine as up, let's say, or I measure mine as down. It doesn't matter. I measure it as one either up or down. The other one is either up or down correspondingly to make it cancel every single time. And that has to happen because of conservation. Now, so there's nothing wrong with that, but where does the faster than light communication come from? Well, if I measure mine, I collapse it. I collapse it either to up or to down, like instantaneously. I measure mine in Canada. I'm measuring mine in Toronto. I ask you, like you measure yours, and it turns out it still matches, even though there was no, for light to have traveled from me to you, it didn't have enough time. It wouldn't have reached you. So it's strange. How the heck, if these didn't have something defined before, I defined mine by looking at it. It collapsed. It collapses up. How the heck does yours even know to collapse to down in order to conserve globally? So that's what quantum entanglement is, and there are ways of formulating that experiment. I don't think they go as far as hundreds of kilometers, but I think they've done it I think it's been done to like 12 kilometers. I'm not sure.
Yeah, even anything apart is
right,
just astonishing.
Like a meter.
Yeah, just astonishing. Now, I would like to talk a little bit about consciousness because, again, as I mentioned in the beginning, a lot of people talk about that relationship with UFOs, which I really don't understand. But what is the relationship between consciousness and the brain?
So that's an extremely difficult question. That depends on if one is a materialist or an idealist, and maybe some other ist or some other ism. So in the materialist sense, they would say that, hey, there's just some interactions of particles, some dynamics, and that creates consciousness. And then in the idealist, consciousness is fundamental sense, they would say, no, the brain is an element of consciousness, and you're somehow interacting with consciousness. So it's consciousness. It's not as if the brain produces consciousness. The brain is what consciousness looks like from another perspective. I don't know. I don't know how to answer such a question.
Yeah. Well, I also wondered what type of beings have consciousness and what don't. In other words, does an ant have consciousness? I mean, I don't know how that is measured or anything.
Yeah, I don't know. And this is an age-old question. It's unclear. It's extreme. So I can lead you down some dark places if you seriously contend with that question.
And basically, how would consciousness arise from a physical presence?
You're asking like the hardest questions, man.
Well,
these are questions that philosophers.
I had some help.
These are some philosophers have been asking this question for decades, and then maybe even some rudimentary version of it for millennia. So I don't know how to answer that.
Yeah. And by the way, this is you're gonna probably laugh when you hear this. I used AI for some of these questions.
Sure.
And there's a new chat out there. I'm sure you probably heard of it.
Yeah.
So I used that in asking for help with these questions, and it really posed some difficult questions, I think. And here's another one: how does consciousness shape our perception of reality?
I don't know. I would say that it doesn't shape our perception of reality. It allows us to perceive. So an analogy would be computers. So what's the relationship between computers and computation? Well, computers allow computation to occur. Computers aren't computation per se.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know if that's satisfactory. It's so the act of perceiving is consciousness. Then I don't know how to explain it. I'm sorry, Martin.
Yeah, no, this is really interesting. And
this AI is a great.
Yeah, it's the AI. And I'm going to ask a question about that in a minute. But and so I also asked, what's a really good question to ask about free will, because that's another one that's really an interesting topic that I think is anyway. And is free will an illusion or is it a reality?
I think free will is a word like consciousness, where it's unclear how to explicitly define it, but it does have a meaning. We mean something when we say it. It just seems that our rational attempts to investigate it are like us trying to grab water and it just falls through our hands. And it means that it's easy to conclude that it's an illusion. I think that's the easiest route to take. I think that it's the logical route to take. That's difficult to say, but I don't think that rationality and logic is all. So I think that we're trying to capture something that's extremely elusive, and it allows people like Daniel Dennett to conclude that even consciousness is an illusion. So I don't know. I think that it has meaning, and we're not properly characterizing it. We're trying to with our words, and our words can't define it currently. So there's two options to that. One is the non-dual route of just not speaking about it. This just escapes, just experience it. The other route is that we need a more explicated language. And I tend to take both routes. I'm exploring both. Much of these investigations into theories of everything, an inference that's easy to draw is that we should just forget about speaking about it. Just live your life, go in the mountains, love, and be endearing. And I think that's partly true. I also think it's true that there are several problems. In fact, virtually every problem we can think of that millennia ago couldn't be solved because we didn't have the language for it, and now we can. I think that it's just part of the problem, by the way, is making specific part of the solving is making specific what is the problem. So now that Chalmers has made explicit, seemingly, the hard problem of consciousness, which is, I think, 20 years old now or so, maybe 25, I imagine that the hard problem of consciousness will be solved in 25 years. And and now this is my present deliberation again. So I don't like to state opinions because I am fickle and my mind is mercurial. It changes fairly rapidly. So either way, I think my current deliberation is that consciousness, the hard problem, will be solved in 25 years, and it will be so trivial. And we'll look back and think, oh, that was obvious. And furthermore, there will be some new problem. Right now, that's the fad. Like, oh my gosh, you can't go into a philosophical discussion without mentioning the hard problem of consciousness. So, but go back 100 years, that wasn't even there. I imagine that something new will occur that just blows our mind, and we can't imagine, how could you ever derive this from this? Like the ought from the is, perhaps, or maybe even more fundamental. And then our understanding of what fundamental is will constantly change.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I think we're done our show basically, and I want to thank you so much for being here. And I did have one. Let's see if you can answer this real quickly because we only have about 30 seconds here. Do you think that AI is a dangerous thing for our future?
I think it may be the most dangerous, but I don't know. Again, I don't know. And I think that some of the people who are working on AI, I think they should examine their motivations and examine what they're doing. Some of the people at OpenAI who are creating ChatGPT and GPT-4 and the Midjourney 3 and DALL-E 4 or DALL-E 3, I think that they don't think about the consequences of what they're doing. Same with Google, same with Microsoft. I think they're all engineers, or the majority of them are engineers. And it's akin to people who are in the Manhattan Project, who are physicists, who are so jazzed about the physics, super jazzed. It's fun. Me and you were having an extreme amount of fun speaking about this. It's even more fun to investigate it with a pen and a paper and do research. I think that they don't realize that what they're creating, they're going to burn their hands. Just like Einstein said, I would have burned my hands had I known the consequences of what I had signed off to.
Yeah.
Speaking about the nuclear bomb.
Right.
And so a question is like, well, for these open AI people, sure, what you're doing has there's the possibility for extreme public benefit, but is that worth the possibility for extreme destruction, perhaps even civilization annihilation?
Very well could happen.
I think that they need to, I think each person needs to think about, is what I'm doing ethical, or possibly can it be turned into something unethical? Yeah. And I think that it's terrible. It's a terrible place to be, where someone says, well, look, I'm not going to quit my job at Google because one, it pays well, and second, if I don't do it, someone else will. That reminds me of this movie. I forget what it was, but it has Nicolas Cage, and he was a weapons dealer, I believe. And he said, hey, I may as well deal weapons because if I don't, someone else is going to take my position. I think that's abdicating your culpability. I think it's extremely dangerous, and I think you should allow someone else to do it, even if I think you should keep your hands clean. Keep your own hands clean. Don't worry that someone else is going to dirty their hands.
Right. Hey, Curt, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
It's been a pleasure, man.
All right. I'll talk to you later.
All right.
All right, everyone. We'll be back next week with Dean Aliotto, and Happy New Year to you all.